Dr. Hanson Chishimba is a researcher and lecturer of development economics at the University of Zambia. He holds a PhD in governance with specialisation in public finance. Hanson is also the author of the book Equalisation Transfers and Service Delivery in Local Authorities in Zambia. This episode dives into city service delivery and governance in Zambia, how national and city managers are trying to overcome the challenges of inadequate service delivery, which is largely attributed to inadequate technical, administrative, and financial capacities in cities. Anson, welcome. It's great to have you on the show. Can you give us a brief introduction to your background and what inspires you in the work that you do?
Throughout my career, I've worked in the public sector as a technical specialist investments at the Industrial Development Corporation in Zambia, uh, in charge of mining, manufacturing, and agribusiness. Besides that, I've served as a chief housing and settlement officer and as district planning officer at the Lusaka City Council. Some of my roles in this function include community engagements, uh, development of comprehensive financial models and business plans, project management, monitoring and evaluation, and conducting of social and economic research, as well as the development of integrated development plans.
So, what exactly are the main challenges to effective service delivery and governance in Zambia?
Looking at the challenges, I will sum them up into two. The first one, I'll elaborate on the infrastructure challenge. Then second, I will discuss the capacity challenges. So like many cities around the world, uh, Zambia, Zambian municipalities have actually been facing a challenge with regards to infrastructure investment. We've seen that most municipalities in Zambia have actually been lagging in terms of infrastructure. The available infrastructure is not able to meet the expectations or catch up, match the growing population within Zambia. And so we have seen a mismatch in terms of available infrastructure and the increasing population. So a lag in infrastructure has been so evident, especially when you look at economic infrastructure and the social infrastructure. We have a lag in terms of the road network. We have a lag in terms of social investments in schools, uh, health centers. Um, we have a lag in infrastructure on sanitation and uh, the drainage networks. And so, because of this lag, we have seen a number of problems emanating from this lag. If you look at the road infrastructure, most of the roads that we have in Zambia were constructed years ago when the population was quite small. But then with the increase in population, we see increased congestion, especially in cities like Lusaka. We're seeing a huge, uh, very severe deficit in terms of housing for urban municipalities. We're also seeing a lack of sanitation facilities in most of our towns. And so this lag has resulted into a number of social and economic costs. I would give you an example. When I was just driving to work this morning, I spent an hour to cover a stretch of about 2.5 kilometers. And so look at the amount of time I'm wasting. And so if we were to aggregate that, if we look at the number of people who are in that traffic and just aggregate the loss in terms of productivity and economic gains that our country and cities would have enjoyed if I was not stuck in that traffic, it's actually immense. And so It's because of this infrastructure lag that we also see a limitation in terms of the growth potential, the economic potential of the cities being hampered, because no investor wants to invest in an area that has inadequate infrastructure. I want to go in an area where I know my kids will be able to go to school. So we need investment in better schools, investment in proper hospitals, investment in proper sanitation, because I would want to have access to clean water and just proper drainages. I want the environment to be a good environment. And so because of this lag, we've seen that the growth potential of most of our municipalities has actually been hampered. If we look at capacity challenges, we did a research in 2018 on the technical, administrative, and the financial capacities of these local authorities, and it was saddening to discover that most of our municipalities have inadequate technical, administrative, and financial capacity. If we look at the technical aspect, we see that most municipalities have inadequate technical personnel in charge of service provision. Most municipalities in Zambia, particularly the cities, are managed by an average of 7 engineers against a population of over 2 million. And so it's practically not possible for the 7. And in most instances, the rural municipalities are managed by an average of 1 engineer and 1 planner, city planner. And so you see that these inadequate capacities are so huge, and that these are some of the reasons why we have residents not being satisfied with the levels of public service that these local authority are actually given to the residents of these jurisdictions. So basically, those are the major challenges that we have and that are predominant in most of the municipalities of Zambia.
Thank you, Hanson. How exactly are national and city managers trying to overcome the challenges of inadequate service delivery?
There are a lot of initiatives that have been implemented by city managers to redress the challenges that they are facing and that their residents are facing, particularly of inadequate service provision. But let me state that the biggest challenge that we have done is that in resolving these problems, most of our municipalities are actually not able to service or maintain the current infrastructure. And so I will address your question in twofold, because they gave you the 2 challenges in twofold. And so equally the problems, we will resolve them. I will be able to provide initiatives in that manner. And so if we look at how the city managers are resolving infrastructure challenges, the first thing to note is that municipalities in Zambia have already demonstrated inadequacies in terms of management of city infrastructure. We've seen that they have not been able to adequately maintain the existing infrastructure. Remember, we already have a problem of inadequate infrastructure, but even that inadequate infrastructure, we have municipalities, cities that are not able to maintain this infrastructure. And so even when we say how then are they trying to solve this problem, most of their initiatives are around construction of new infrastructure, which in a way is increasing their maintenance costs, the maintenance bills under their budgets. And so what we've seen is that there's been a drive towards construction of new infrastructure. In most cases, this drive is being done in collaboration with central government and other collaborating partners. In terms of road infrastructure, I think in the recent past, most of the municipalities have received a fair share of road expansion that they've had to invest in road expansion. For instance, central government, in collaboration with municipalities around the country, have invested in road projects. An example is the Lusaka 400 project, where 400 kilometers of township roads were upgraded, rehabilitated, and tarred, particularly in the city of Lusaka. We also had a similar project on the copper belt, should be the L 300 kilometers. I mean the C 300 kilometers, which was a road project to rehabilitate and expand local roads around municipalities on the copper belt. Besides that, cities like Lusaka have also implemented what they're calling the Lusaka Decongestion Project, where they've built a number of flyover bridges just to decongest the city, where they've also expanded main roads. Beyond that, we've seen the American people, in collaboration with central government and the municipality of Lusaka, implementing a sanitation project where they've invested massively in upgrading and construction of sanitation facilities, as well as drainage facilities. So in terms of infrastructure, we've actually seen that drive where local authorities are moving towards allocating greater portions of their resources into infrastructure just to make sure that they keep pace with the growing population. Beyond that, we've seen calls by local authorities encouraging private and public institutional investors to actually invest in infrastructure. So we've seen a number of institutional investors investing in a number of shopping malls. Institutional investors like the National Pension Fund have also invested in housing complex, where they're trying to mitigate the housing deficit within municipalities around the country. In terms of capacity challenges, we've had a number of initiatives implemented, obviously been driven by the central government, but then in collaboration with the local governments, which are the municipalities. So under governance, we've seen the introduction of the office of mayor being elected by the locals of that jurisdiction. In Zambia, previously, mayors were elected by fellow councillors. And so what was discovered is that then councillors were more accountable to their voters who were the councillors. And so they were not so accountable to residents of those cities. And so to redress that challenge, there's actually an amendment in their constitution where mayors are now elected by residents of of that jurisdiction. This actually gives them more authority, and that they should be more accountable to the people that vote for them, and that their mandate is from the people and not from the councillors. Beyond that, to increase the administrative and technical capacities of these local authorities, we've seen that the government introduced what we call in the local government service commission. It's a body corporate in charge of recruitment and retention of qualified manpower for municipalities around the country. And so we've seen that most local authorities are now being managed by qualified personnel. In terms of redressing the financial capacities, what's been realized is that the expenditure responsibilities of most of these local authorities have been so high compared to the revenue responsibilities that have been assigned to these local authorities. And so to redress that, city managers have been trying to modernize their revenue collection tools. This is where we see revenue systems being modernized and introducing technologies that just enhance efficiency and seal any loopholes that might have been in the revenue collection systems. But beyond that, we've seen government introducing, central government introducing the local government equalization fund. This was after the realization that the revenue capacities of most cities was not the same. And so to equalize this differentiated, the difference in revenue capacities, government introduced what they're calling the local government equalization fund. This is actually meant to provide a predictable and stable source of revenue for local authorities, with the view that local authorities then will be able to enhance and just improve service provision to the public. Beyond that, we've seen the introduction of the Constituency Development Fund, which is also part of the intergovernmental transfers to city managers, meant to help them implement development projects, particularly infrastructure development. And so under that, we've seen a number of municipalities constructing schools and health centers. And so those have been some of the initiatives that these local authorities have been implementing. Of course, a large part of these initiatives being supported by central government and collaborating partners.
You've mentioned key solutions, but still you were stuck in traffic for 1.5 hours over a 2.5 kilometer period. How do we speed up progress and implementation of these new solutions?
Definitely, there'll always be something that can be done to speed up. So we acknowledge that development is a process. It may not happen over time, but then to just speed up the process of resolving most of these city problems is an increase, a continued increase in terms of fiscal allocation to mitigating some of these problems, and a continued realignment of revenue responsibilities, because where we see that there's a break or a source of these problems, I think is where we have a mismatch in revenue and expenditure responsibility of these local authorities. So in Zambia, all the local authorities are given the same responsibilities, despite the differences in their revenue capacities and revenue base. And so to resolve this problem, what then should be done to speed up the problem, the solutions, is that government should continue to increase the revenue responsibilities. If not, they should continue increasing the intergovernmental transfers to the municipalities so that we have municipalities whose expenditure responsibility are matching with the revenues that are available on their table. So you can't give me 100 responsibility, expenditure responsibility, and yet you give me one or two revenue sources, which in most cases are actually very unproductive revenue sources. So we have local authorities been in charge of revenue sources that are actually very unproductive, meaning the revenues that we're able to generate from these cannot meet the expenditure that is needed for us to just be able to execute even a quarter of these functions that have been allocated to local authorities. And so to speed up that problem, we have to continue advocating that central government continues to transfer many of its revenue responsibilities to local authorities. In instances where they feel these revenues may not be efficiently collected by municipalities, government can continue to collect those, but then make sure that a greater portion of whatever is collected is transferred back to municipalities so that these municipalities can have sufficient spending power to enable them maintain existing infrastructure, at the same time remain with extra revenue that they should then invest in new infrastructure to cater for the growing population within these cities. In terms of administrative capacities, we are of the view that government should then continue to encourage capacity building, training for local authorities, particularly in financial management and the adoption of new technologies in providing service to the public. We should encourage our city engineers, city planners to continuously upgrade and be open to modern technologies of how best we can save cities.
How do you think cities and municipalities will stay relevant going into the future?
It's simple. Municipalities are in charge of most of our warfare, and they're the governments closest to us. And so for them to remain relevant, that means they should be able to continuously provide satisfactory services to me. Those services, of course, I know will come at a cost. And so I expect, even in the way they do their costings, I don't expect them to charge exorbitant prices. What I would want is to pay value for all services that are provided by these municipalities. And so to remain relevant, they have to adopt innovative technologies in terms of service provision. They just have to make sure that even as I want to access their services, I'm not inconvenienced. That means they have to provide efficient services, effective services, which are easy to access and at the right cost. Yeah, basically, that's what I would want to see if at all the municipalities have to remain relevant within these cities. If they're able to respond to the challenges that I'm facing, particularly challenges of congestion because it's so frustrating, challenges of flooding because every now and then in most cities in our country we experience flooding whenever we have rains for like the whole day, which is largely attributed to poor city planning and the clogged drainages. Uh, in most of the surrounding places, we've seen cities not being able to provide sanitation facilities. So this is where we now see an emergence of the soakaway and septic arrangement of sanitation, where if you're given a land size of a 20 by 20, you put up your house because the municipality has not been able to provide sanitation services. You put up a soakaway and septic tank within that same land size. And to make a problem worse, the municipality is not able to provide water services. So you have to drill a bore within the same space. And so we have a situation where people are now drinking unsafe water, untreated water. And so if they are to remain relevant, they have to be proactive and actively invest in these sectors that matter so much to individuals.
Hanson, in closing, what are some of the key takeaways in your new book, Equalisation, Transfers, and Service Delivery in Local Authorities in Zambia?
My book, I'll share some of the excerpts there. It's essentially an analysis of equalization transfers to local authorities, where I've traced the evolution of municipalities in Zambia. I've also looked at the effectiveness of these equalization transfers. Remember, government introduced equalization transfers, which in essence are intergovernmental transfers, these local authorities to enable municipalities improve their service provision to the locals. And so this was an in-depth uh, research to just look at how effective these intergovernmental transfers have been vis-a-vis on service provision. But beyond that, I've tried to analyze the revenue and expenditure responsibilities of local authorities in Zambia and how we can redress the horizontal and vertical imbalances that are existing. But beyond that, I've also looked at the fiscal illusion that is now prevalent in most local authorities, where we see a number of municipalities not being able to accurately perceive their expenditure and revenue. And so there's a break in the link between revenue and expenditure. And so it revolves around issues of how then local authorities are supposed to improve their service provision by enhancing their technical, administrative, and financial capacities.
A big thank you to Hanson Chishimba for this insightful conversation on Future Cities Africa.